Hello and thank you for joining me, Joe Unwin, also known as FlowJo, on another PowerFX functions video. Today we are going to be looking at the concatenate function, and this shouldn't be confused with the concat function. So there's two functions in PowerFX, concatenate and concat. Now the difference between these is concatenate is doing static text. So for example, you could take a string of Flo and a string of Joe and combine them, or you could take a single row from a single column table and you can take that string and you can add it together with another string. But what you can't do is you can't iterate through data and concatenate all that data. That is what the concat function does. So if you're looking for a function that can cycle through a load of data and combine them to concatenate them together, you're looking for the concat function. But this function, however, is more of a static string concatenate function. So let's begin. Okay, so we mentioned how you can combine two strings. As you can see on your screen, I've got a string section and I've got concatenate, then I open the parentheses, I simply use quotation marks, I type flow, then I do end of quotation marks, comma, open the quotation marks again, put Joe in, and end the quotation marks and end the parentheses. Now what this does then is it combines the two strings, so Flo and Joe, together to provide us with one string of FlowJo. But what we can also do then, as mentioned previously, is we can actually use a single column table. So if we've got a single column table called NameDataTable, and all it is it's one column, it can't have multiple columns, it's one column of names. So it has like FlowJo, it has Jax, it has Meg, say it has those three, right? We can actually take the one that's selected, so we have the individual one. For example, let's say it's FlowJo is the first one that's selected. Then what we can do is we can concatenate that with something else. So in this instance, I'm doing concatenate the selected name from that particular table column, and then I'm doing a space, and then I'm doing selected. So if we used FlowJo as an example, it would say FlowJo space selected. Then if I select another one, it would say Jax selected, and so on. So let's actually jump over to our demo and take a look at how this works then. So I'm just going over to the demo screen, and as you can see here, I've got FlowJo show up straight away, and I've also got FlowJo selected. But because this is static, and as you can see at the top, it just says concatenate Flo and Joe, all it's doing is it's taking the inputs of the text. So you could get that text from anywhere, but as long as it's a single text, it's not actually changing. In the instance of you're not cycling through data, you're just getting a single text. You could then modify this however you want to. So let's say Jax, and then we could add after a comma, we just add another quotation marks, and we could say space and space. So you can actually do the spaces in the actual text that you're combining, comma, and then Joe. So in this instance, we've now got Jax and Joe. So as you can see, it's really easy to concatenate and make a single string from multiple strings. And it's really easy to do. All you add is another comma and then add your next string. But what you've got to be careful of is spaces. So how do spaces work? If I, for instance, take out this and we just have Jax Joe, you can see there's no space there. Now, obviously, you want to do a space. Now, what you can do is you can add it after Jax, for example, or you can add it before Joe. But if you're pulling this data in from somewhere else, let's say a table, what you want to do then is you'll want to actually add a space that's always going to be there, and you'll do that yourself. So in this instance, we've got Jax, comma, then what we would do is we'll open the quotation marks, add a space, close the quotation marks, and add a comma. And now you can see Jax and Joe has a space between them. So that's how easy it is to add a space in concatenate as well, that you make sure that you don't have to manipulate the string that's actually being input into concatenate. Now again, it's not the concat function. We're not cycling through data and adding all of that and concatenating all of that data together. We're just focusing on the static strings that we've got. So Let's look at this one then, the single column table strings. Here I've got a little button, and all that button is doing is it's creating a name table, and it's got one single column, name. So it's got FlowJo, it's got Jax, and it's got Meg. So we've got 3 names in that. And as you can see on this little data table down here, we've got the name column, and we've got FlowJo, Jax, and Meg. So it says FlowJo is selected because, as you can see here, this is selected. But what that's doing then is it's concatenating the selected name. So obviously we needed to actually be one item. So we need to do the selected name, for example. So we're doing NameDataTable, which is the name of this data table, .selected.name. So we're targeting that one column. Okay, so now we have that actual name column, and we've got the selected one. We've got one string, static string, that is then coming back to us, and we're concatenating that. So if we put a comma there, and then we do a space, as we mentioned before, we will just do the quotation marks, space, quotation marks, and do another comma, then we'll add selected. So now what we're doing is we're having the one that's selected, we've got a space, and then we've got that it's actually selected. So if I actually click on one of these, for example, Jax, it now updates to Jax selected. And if I click on another one, it updates to Meg selected. So as you can see, you can actually change what's going on when something is being selected by simply concatenating the output of that select with a space and selected. So if you was, let's say, working on a project and you needed to highlight to the user what one is selected, or you wanted to take that and combine it with some text, this is how you would do that. Okay, so let's review what we've done then. We've taken some static strings and we've just added the text in. Now this could be coming from somewhere else. So for example, we've got NameDataTable.Selected.Name. You could use use first, for example, and take the first item, but it has to be a single item of a string. You can't actually cycle through all the data and combine all of the data together. That would be the concat function. So on the concatenate function, you need to use what we would call static strings. So in this instance, we've got Jax space Joe. Replace it with whatever you want. And in this instance, we've got FlowJo is selected. So we've actually taken something from a table, we're adding a space and combining it with selected, and now we've got a string that's showing what's actually happening. Now let's think about where this would be useful then. Let's say someone was entering a username and you wanted to combine that with a email address, a domain. Let's say you have Joe here. Actually, let's do FlowJo. And then you wanted to combine that with an @ and then you wanted to combine it with the domain of flowjo.io. You can see now we have built an email address using the concat function simply by passing in the name and the @ and the domain. So now we have built an email address using the concat function. So you can see how useful this can be, especially if you're trying to combine strings together when working on your project. So that's how easy it is to use the concat function on PowerFX, and I look forward to seeing you next time on our PowerFX series.